All right, let's dive right into this explainer on how the NBA went from literally fighting for its life in 1949 to a multi-billion-dollar business showdown in 2011. If you follow the modern game, you already know the staggering amounts of money involved today. But the foundation of how all that cash is divided and the tension it creates, well, that's rooted in a deep history of intense labor disputes and massive structural compromises. To really grasp these billion-dollar stakes, we're going to break this down into 5 parts. The birth of the NBA, the start of the 2011 lockout, the fight over billions, the brinkmanship and lawsuits, and finally, the new agreement. Starting with part 1, the birth of the NBA, which was honestly a completely desperate merger. Right from day one, there was this massive economic divide between the big and small markets. On one side, you had the Basketball Association of America, playing in huge venues like Madison Square Garden. And they were competing directly with the National Basketball League, which was operating out of tiny, cramped gymnasiums in places like Fort Wayne and Sheboygan. This big city versus small town dynamic, it's a thread we're going to see pulling all the way through our analysis today. So that tension forced their hand. On August 3, 1949, the two leagues merged in a massive compromise just to keep the sport alive. By forming a 17-team league, they could finally bring superstar attractions like the legendary George Mikan under one unified roof, blending those major market arenas with the small-town talent pools. But pro basketball came so incredibly close to failing right out of the gate. Even after the merger, by the 1954-55 season, the league had shrunk down to just 8 teams. Fan support was totally evaporating. But then, they invented the 24-second shot clock in 1954. It forced a much faster, way more entertaining pace. And it worked. Fans came rushing back, the league finally became financially stable, and the stage was set for decades of explosive growth. Fast forward to Chapter 2, the 2011 lockout begins, bringing a brand new threat to the league's survival. Remember that big market versus small market divide from 1949? Well, here it is again, 6 decades later. Owners of small market teams started petitioning the league, arguing that the financial structure was just inherently broken. They felt it left them completely unable to compete with the major market powerhouses. And even worse, they literally couldn't keep their businesses afloat. To put that in perspective, the owners claimed they were collectively losing a staggering $300 million every single year. They asserted that 22 out of the 30 teams in the league were operating in the red under the old 2005 agreement. With a financial gap of that magnitude, a massive structural shakeup wasn't just likely, it was inevitable. Which brings us to Chapter 3, fighting over billions and the epic battle for basketball-related income. To truly grasp why these negotiations were so incredibly tense, we've got to look at how the money was divided before the lockout. Under the old agreement, the players were guaranteed a 57% share of the league's revenues. That left the owners with 43%. Now, given those massive financial losses the owners were reporting, that 57% figure became the absolute primary target they desperately wanted to change. And the divide at the negotiating table was just vast. The owners wanted to slash the players' share by a massive 10%, knocking them down to 47%. The players, who obviously wanted to protect their earnings and the gains made by previous generations, firmly countered with 53%. So you've got billions of dollars in future earnings hanging in the balance of just a few percentage points. But, it wasn't just about the revenue split. The salary cap was a massive friction point, too. The owners argued for competitive balance and wanted a true hard cap, a strict ceiling that absolutely no team could exceed to stop big market teams from just buying championships. The players, on the other hand, vehemently fought to keep a soft cap, which gives teams the flexibility to go over the limit to retain their own star players. Hand in hand with the cap is the luxury tax. Since the players wouldn't agree to a hard cap, the owners proposed incredibly punitive financial penalties for teams that exceeded the soft cap, up to $4 for every single dollar spent over the limit. The players felt this was basically a Trojan horse. They argued that if the penalties were that severe, it would effectively act as a hard cap anyway, suppressing player salaries right across the board. The players actively pushed back against these sweeping changes, pointing out that outspending the competition doesn't actually guarantee you a championship. They used the San Antonio Spurs, a smaller market team that had won multiple titles, as proof. Their argument was that a team's front office intelligence, like draft efficiency and player development, was way more important to winning than just throwing unlimited money at a massive payroll. Now we hit Chapter 4, brinkmanship and lawsuits, where the entire season goes into jeopardy. The ticking clock was now a very harsh reality. As the calendar flicked from September to November, the cancellations just kept escalating. First, training camps were axed, then the rest of the preseason. But by October 10th, actual, meaningful, regular season games were being wiped from the schedule. As the lost season became a real possibility, the pressure on both sides was just immense.
So how did the players respond? They escalated the legal battle with a truly fascinating high-stakes maneuver. After rejecting the owner's final offer, the players actually dissolved their own labor union, converting it into a trade association. Why? Because as individual employees rather than a union, they were legally permitted to file massive class-action antitrust lawsuits against the league, accusing the NBA of an illegal group boycott.
And the pressure wasn't just between the players and the league. Internal divisions were forming on both sides. Get this, Miami Heat owner Mickey Arison was actually fined $500,000 by the league commissioner just for tweeting about the lockout. It was a calculated move to keep ownership completely in lockstep, while hardliners aggressively pushed to hold the players to that 47% revenue share.
Finally, we reached Chapter 5, the new agreement, the deal that shaped the modern NBA. Under intense pressure, a grand compromise was reached. And like any fierce negotiation, neither side got exactly what they wanted. The owners secured their harsher luxury tax to penalize overspenders, and they knocked maximum contract lengths down from 6 years to 5. The players, meanwhile, avoided that dreaded hard salary cap and secured a revenue band hovering right around a 50-50 split, depending on how much the league grew. The new deal also introduced some incredibly specific mechanics that completely changed team building. They created a one-time amnesty exemption, basically letting teams magically erase one bad contract from their salary cap. And to make sure young superstars were properly paid, they instituted the Derrick Rose rule. This allowed rookie extensions to jump up to 30% of the salary cap if a player hit elite milestones, like winning an MVP award.
161. That is the exact number of days this bitter lockout lasted. For over 5 months, the entire basketball world just held its breath, right up until the new deal was officially ratified by both sides on December 8, 2011. And 66. This number represents the tangible, lasting impact on the sport. Because negotiations dragged on so long, the 2011 to 2012 regular season was permanently slashed from the standard 82 games down to just 66. It was a frantic, condensed season that stands as a permanent historical marker of this massive labor battle. So, as we wrap up this explainer and look back at how the league evolved from that desperate 1949 merger to a corporate standoff in 2011, it leaves us with one really provocative thought. Considering the astronomical, non-stop growth of global sports revenues today, how long can this delicate balance of power truly last? Is labor peace ever permanent, or is it just a temporary pause before the next billion-dollar battle? Thanks so much for learning with us, and we'll see you in the next explainer.